Welcome to Horror Makes Us Happy, the podcast where we ask the question, what is it about horror that makes us happy? Your hosts are Steve Becker and Chris Wetman, and you can find out more about us at horrormakesushappy.com. Today's guest is Marcus Koch, who did special effects on American Guinea Pig and directed Bloodshot. Thank you for joining us, Marcus. Before we get into the meat of the interview, is there anything that you want to plug?
Well, we can talk about that at the end of the show.
Sure. Okay.
That works.
So a little more information before we get started for both you and the listeners. Starting with a trigger warning, we're going to be talking about horror movies, which could involve anything: murder, rape, suicide, child abuse, F-bombs. We do not censor ourselves, so if you're not prepared for that, please take care of yourself and then come back when you are ready. In this interview, we'll be asking 3 sets of questions covering your childhood, teenage years, and adulthood to find out what it is about horror that you like. The idea is that if we interview enough people, we might find some interesting common themes, but also might find some uncommon ones. It's not meant to be a therapy session, so if there are any questions you don't want to answer, just say, we'll pass on that and we'll move on. But we will be asking the same questions a couple different ways, mainly because sometimes if you think about things in terms of, the context of childhood versus teenage years versus adulthood, thinking about them in the different contexts sometimes reminds you of memories that you had forgotten about. And so we're trying to get to all that.
The safe word is stab it.
Stab what?
Stab it. Like STAHPIT. Stab it.
So starting with childhood, what are some of your earliest memories of scary things?
Oh, that's a good one.
It always is.
the first movie, and I don't remember this, but my parents took me to the drive-in to see Hell Night with Linda Blair. And while I don't remember this, there's a particular scene where it's the traditional jump scare, but apparently I crawled out of my skin, so they've kind of exposed me to horror movies very early on. And, from that point, we'd always go to the drive-in, or we'd go to the movie theater or rent VHS, and it was always horror. So it was my parents who really got me into horror, and I was watching it at a very early age. And so I had an understanding that okay, none of this is real, and so movies standout moments that I remember scaring the hell out of me was the clown in Poltergeist under the bed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it's horror. I've just grown up with it, so it's kind of always been there. And I kind of got into effects because I would always ask my dad how they did something, someone would get decapitated. I'm like, how'd they do that? And his answer was special effects. And so probably around 8 or so, I was like, I need to know more about this special effects stuff, because I don't want to do that. You can do that as a job.
Cool. So other than Hell Night or Poltergeist, any others that really jump out as something you remember from your childhood?
Well, I always gravitated towards films like The Burning, The Prowler, The Friday the 13th. Even though I'm not much of a slasher fan nowadays, I think I just liked them more just because I wanted to see the special effects, the blood and the guts. I wanted to see and try and figure out how that was done. So early on was a lot of the classic slasher films.
Yeah. Classic big heads getting decapitated, limbs getting chopped off. Props on The Burning for that reference, by the way. That's when I saw that, it was amazed by how many celebrities were in that early on. You got
George a very young Jason Alexander. Who was the guy from Short Circuit? He was in there very, very young.
Fisher Stevens, also the villain from Hackers. There's a shit ton of unexpected cameos in that movie.
A lot of people get their start in horror. Horror's not so bad.
It's an easy industry to get started in.
So I'm guessing, you mentioned that even very early on, you knew that the stuff wasn't real and you were interested in the special effects. Do you remember anything that actually scared you?
Oh yeah. Magic.
Magicians? What's Up My Sleeve?
No, the movie with Anthony Hopkins and the ventriloquist doll.
Okay.
And there was a time, when I was probably like 7 or 8 years old, that like I was terrified of ventriloquist dolls.
Yeah.
Another movie, which isn't a horror film, but like has a ventriloquist doll moving around on its own. It was called Zapped with Scott Baio and Willie Ames.
Scott Baio.
I think I remember that one.
Yeah, there's a scene where he like possesses like or like makes a ventriloquist doll fly around and like scare someone, and I was like terrified of that.
Yeah, I have never heard of Magic, but I'm checking it out on IMDb right now, and that is a terrifying ventriloquist doll. That's oh my god, that is the creepiest fucking
great
thing.
Psychological film. Yeah, highly recommend it. It's a good watch.
I'm gonna check this one out. Jesus.
We'll touch on both aspects then, both the enjoyment and the fear. Let's start with the fear of the ventriloquist dolls. What was it that scared you about them?
Is it just the soulless, unblinking stare?
I don't know. Just their mouths. Like, yeah, and I guess when I was a kid, like I'd have nightmares that like rooms would be filled with like ventriloquist dolls, and they'd all open their mouths and start screaming.
Was it like because of the uncanny valley thing, or?
Yeah, I think maybe, yeah. That I never thought about it like that.
You were probably too young to understand Uncanny Valley at the time, but that's totally what that is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that makes sense. So, and then the things that you enjoyed in terms of the special effects, what was it that you enjoyed about the special effects? Just figuring out?
Yeah, just figuring out how they were done. Like I, obviously knew that they weren't really getting hurt, so that didn't bother me, the violence that I was seeing, because I was just trying to figure out like, okay, well, if, how could that effect be achieved? Is this, a dummy, or is this a makeup? I just try and wrap my head around like, how the trick was pulled off. Like, what about it made me believe it?
Okay. One of the questions that we have here is about the social aspect and whether or not, and for example, in my case, my father, he kind of teased me. My father took me to see not Poltergeist. Yeah, Poltergeist.
Also a drive-in, wasn't it?
No, that wasn't at a drive-in, but for a second there I was getting mixed up between Poltergeist and Exorcist. But yeah, he took me to Poltergeist, but he kind of got enjoyment out of me being scared or creeped out by it. But it sounds like in your case, your parents were more, I don't want to say empathetic, but more supportive, maybe, like they enjoyed it with you.
Yeah. And they definitely still, watch horror movies. Like anytime I'm home for like Christmas or whatever, it's Christmas time and we'll pop on something like, we watched Hell Night this past year, just for old time's sake, or like, we watched stuff like Night of the Comet.
I'm just laughing, thinking to myself that that's an interesting family popping on Hell Night for old time's sake.
Right? It's nostalgic, the player.
Did you have anybody other than your parents who were fans that participated in that with you as a kid?
I mean, my sister,
Okay.
Like we'd watch Ghoulies over and over, just
nice.
We found it like funny as hell. But yeah, not until about high school did I start meeting other people who were into like movies. Everyone else sort of did the normal kid thing, and I was just always into horror movies.
Right. So in your case, and we have a number of questions that we have sort of written down because you never know which questions are gonna apply to whom. So in your case, this at your age didn't introduce any fears that you didn't have, that you had, didn't trigger existing ones, didn't make you change your behavior in any particular way.
Mm-hmm.
It was all fine for you.
Yeah.
All right.
How about Halloween when you were a kid? Any participation?
Oh yeah, I loved Halloween time.
Yeah.
Any favorite costumes?
I did a lot of zombies, just messing around with makeup. Just to see like what I could put on, and before I really got heavy into like, latex and, those things, I would make makeup out of like flour and water, just like pretty much make dough and put it on my face because I could kind of sculpt it and kind of get it to like smooth out, and then you could paint it and So like I was very experimental with like, food things that we had in the kitchen around Halloween.
And it's cheap.
And it's cheap, yeah.
Yeah.
Any least favorite costumes?
There's pictures. I'm too, I was too young to remember it, but there's photos that my grandparents made me and my sister clown outfits, but they were like really, really kind of creepy.
Was it the kind that had the poof balls on them?
Yeah, and there's like a pointy hat and like
Yes.
poof balls. Yeah, it was a really not like a normal kind of clown, like more of like a
Pagliacci clown.
like an old school type clown. They're really creepy pictures.
Yeah. I can relate to that. That was my least favorite costume as well.
Only Steve got the full Christmas Story treatment, like coming around the stairs and like, oh, you look so cute. And he's just, I fucking hate this.
Yeah. Was there ever a time when you were actually terrified of something as a child?
Yeah, I think the biggest one that I can think of would be like that. Yeah, the clown doll, from Poltergeist, the ventriloquist dummy from Magic. Outside of that, I don't remember being too scared of anything. Yeah, it's a weird one. Like, not much scares me. Like, as an adult, like I have trouble watching movies because I'm still in this brain mode where I'm trying to like break things down, like how they did something, or trying to figure out an effect, where I forget to pay attention to the movie. Where like
you forget to see it as entertainment.
yeah. And so I don't get scared of stuff, but I do kind of wish I'd find a film that would like scare me the way those films did when I was a kid.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the last guest we talked to, we kind of came across, or I maybe came up with the idea that as you go further and further into exploring more horror movies, you never really get that scare anymore. You just get more and more uncomfortably disturbed by the amount of gore and violence. Like, there's no scare. It's just, yeah, this is more fucked up than the last one.
Yeah.
So in your case, horror definitely was a happy thing as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have any scary dreams as a kid? Any reoccurring nightmares?
Just the ventriloquist one with like, and it was on multiple occasions that all these ventriloquist dolls would start screaming. I don't know if you were ever a kid. I mean,
no, never.
But like, when you were a kid, if you ever had like a playground that had like a concrete tube or something, and there was like several kids in it all screaming at once,
yeah,
and the weird pitch shift. Like I've never heard this sound since I was a kid, because I guess as adults we don't scream shrill with a bunch of us screaming on purpose, but like whatever sound that would make in this like one like concrete tube we had, that was big enough for kids to sit in, like, and we just all scream, and the echo was like this horrible sound that would like fluctuate. That's what in my dream, like the mannequins would all start screaming like.
Yeah, I've moved around a lot when I was a kid. I've lived in Milwaukee, Chicago, Florida, Philly, but most of my childhood was in Milwaukee, Chicago, or Florida. And in Chicago, we had a playground that had one of those pipes that you're talking about, but it wasn't big enough for you to really. You could crawl into it, but you couldn't sit in it. But then when I came here to Florida, they were putting in sewer pipes and drainage pipes instead of. When I first moved down here, they only had drainage ditches. They didn't have actual drain water pipes. And so they were putting those in, and those things were freaking huge. They were like, 6 feet in diameter. So you could walk through one of those. That was, there's plenty of time playing in those things. All right. So jumping over to the teenage years then, what were some of your scary stories or books or movies that impacted you during your teenage years?
By this time when I was, by the time I was 14, I had already I'd been shooting short films, I think, since I was like 8, 9, 10. Like I started stealing my dad's video camera when he was at work because I knew where he hid it. And I would pull it out and I would like make like little stop motion animations or little, not so much as short films, but like experiments. Like I would try my own effects work and film it to see how it would look on camera. And then like I would hide the tape in my room and put the camera back right before I came home from work. And
And he wondered why he was running out of blank tapes.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. But one time, I left the tape in there, and he found like my short little things I was working on. I thought for sure like, oh, I am in trouble. And he was all like, oh, hey, you've been using this and like taking care of this for like you know a year or so and not messed up the camera. So he trusted me with it. And pretty much gave me the camera like carte blanche, and I could do whatever I want. And then from there, I started getting a little more experimental and trying to like shoot with friends as actors and build little stories around like whatever effect I was going to try and do, or what have you. So by the time I was 13, I made a 30-minute movie called White Massacre, and then when I was between 13 and 14, in ninth grade, I made a 60-minute movie called Lunch Meat. And then after that, I thought like, okay, I think I'm ready to move into features. And so at the end of ninth grade, I started a movie called Bad Blood, which was going to be a full feature, with like multiple locations and multiple actors, and that's all I did in my teenage years was work on trying to make my first feature. It took me like 4 or 5 years to complete it.
Still.
Yeah. But it got done. I sat on it forever. I didn't want to show it to anyone. I was like, it's really terrible. But yeah, this past year I decided, fuck it, I'll just release it and
So other than your own works, anything else jump out to you as memorable during that time period?
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. Like you were actively directing and producing at that time. Were there any influences that directly influenced your work at the time?
Oh yeah, definitely early Peter Jackson.
Yeah.
Bad Taste. Bad Taste. I read about in Gore Zone or Fangoria, and we had a video store like walking distance from my house, and I could rent whatever I wanted. My parents like, yeah, it's rated R, whatever, he's fine.
Nice.
But like the video store guy, if I wanted a movie, he would seek it out and get it. And so I read about this movie, Bad Taste, and I was like, oh my gosh, you have to get this. And he got it, and like that really influenced me. Like some of those opening shots where the one alien zombie guy in the blue shirt gets like top of his head blown off, like that like floored me. I was like, oh my god, this is all Gore to a whole new level that I had never really seen before. Not like that.
So anything else? Peter Jackson, Bad Taste?
Peter Jackson, Frank Henenlotter. Like I really love Frankenhooker. Like, and it's weird. Like the older I got, the more I really got into like more like kind of comedy sort of stuff. Like I just like things with a sense of humor to it. Like Frankenhooker, I think is like the ultimate comedy. It's like perfect through and through.
I remember the name, but I don't think I ever saw that one.
Oh, it's awesome. Highly recommend it.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to think what other really comedy horrors would have been in that time frame, because I think
there was one called Transylvania Twist. Yeah, it's fun and campy, but Transylvania 65000 was out around there. Ed Begley Jr. and Jeff Goldblum. Yeah, there kind of wasn't too many, but like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I like Ghostbusters because that was a fun one. Of course, bigger budget.
Definitely.
But the sense of humor is all like all the humor lands.
Yeah, that was one of the things that was nice about Ghostbusters, even though it's definitely a fantastical element to the story, but it's amazing that they actually pulled it off. I mean, you would think that
which part?
If all of it. I mean, like if you just read it on paper and you didn't know that this was going to be like a big budget thing, you'd go, okay, that sounds funny, but like it's going to look stupid. But they actually pulled it off.
And then the city is attacked by a giant man made of marshmallows. And there's a god on a rooftop, and she's got these demon dogs and giant lights coming down from the sky. And it's so we have a 75. We have a $750,000 budget. Yeah, we can make this happen.
Was it really 700?
No, it's probably more than that. I don't know. I was ballparking it. I think even back then, micro budget films were like 1.5 million.
Yeah. So again, even at this point in your life, because you were already starting to work on your own, there wasn't really any fear associated with it. It was just more the excitement of producing your own work. And you had mentioned that you were picking apart the films from a production standpoint. Was there anything at that point in your life that actually scared you?
No, there is one weird thing that I still kind of have like, a phobia over, and this is like really irony at its finest. Like, as much as I do a lot of like, over the top blood, guts, and gore, like the one thing that really does like kind of give me the heebie jeebies is like real blood.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can, look at crime scene photos and see it, but if someone is like just has a paper cut and they're near me, like I'm afraid it's going to get on me.
Yeah, that's a healthy and rational fear, especially this day and age. Their blood has stuff in it that is bad sometimes.
Yeah.
Are you a germaphobe in general, or?
No. I'll drop a cookie on the floor and eat it. Well, I mean, not in all cases. Sometimes I'll be like, yeah, that's a goner, but
yeah, some places are beyond the 10-second rule.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it sounds like we might be around the same age. I mean, AIDS in the 80s was a scary thing, so
yeah,
I can see that being relevant for that time period. I mean, we didn't know what we know about it today. Back then, there was a lot of crap going around.
Yeah, misinformation.
Yeah,
and who knows? Maybe that's where it stems from. Like, I don't know. It's just something that I'm like, get it away from me,
Mm. So you mentioned at this point in your life, you did start meeting some people who also enjoyed horror.
Yeah, in high school, there was a kid in an art class I was taking that he was really into like subversive cinema and kind of introduced me to like a whole other world of films I hadn't yet seen yet, and that was like some early John Woo film like A Better Tomorrow and some of the movies are slipping my mind, but a lot of like I guess at the time I didn't know that that's what they're called, but we call them like At 3 films now. Stuff like Untold Story and Red to Kill. A lot of like Asian kind of rough films.
Okay.
Men Behind the Sun.
What do you mean by At 3?
Category 3. Like it was more or less China's rating system, like how we have PG, PG-13, and R. Like I guess a category 3 would be like the equivalent to rated R films or NC-17 films.
Okay. Again, probably didn't introduce any new fears or trigger any existing ones. Didn't cause you to change your behavior in any weird ways.
No.
In terms of whether or not you were scared, you said no because you were tearing them apart. For the technical aspects, did you participate in Halloween as a teen?
Oh yeah, definitely. I really got big into haunted houses, and so like around the same time, like 14, maybe even prior to that, I had started building like around Halloween time, like a haunted house in our front yard. Like you'll walk up to the door for trick or treaters and just kind of theme it out, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger. Like where I started adding walls, and for the whole month of October, like you'd have to walk through a whole maze to get to the front door, and then started working in like a haunted house at our local mall. I happened to be at the right place at the right time and overheard some guys talking, and I'm like, oh, I got to get in on this because like they're gonna do a haunt. And so I got in on the ground floor of their first year, and stayed with them for like 8 years, through high school, just doing haunts every year at the local mall.
Nice.
That is awesome.
Any favorite costumes as a teen?
Still zombies?
Yeah, I kind of got to the point where I like almost didn't dress up myself anymore, as I was just, doing makeup for other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think by the time it came to Halloween, I was like, tired.
One of those you're immersed in it so often that you're just like, no, I'm good, thank you.
Been doing it for a whole month already. In the last two sections here, I've been approaching this more about potential bad memories. Let me turn it around a little bit and ask, what was it about these things that you enjoyed then? Like I know you mentioned enjoying things from the technical aspect. What was it about the technical achievement that you enjoyed?
Pulling it off and seeing other people's reactions. I was like, okay, if I could pull off like a good effect, and people would, either be grossed out by it, like I kind of got a kick out of that. Or ask like, oh, how'd you do that? That was like the ultimate compliment, is like, oh, they couldn't quite figure it out. Like, and maybe people were just blowing smoke up my ass, like, oh, that's great. You're bad effects. When you see Bad Blood, you'll see.
Well, everybody's got to start somewhere.
Yeah. There's a couple of things that I was like pretty proud of. Like, a gag would work. Like, I did like an edit, because I'd be paying attention to films like, Dead Alive, and kind of watch how some of these gore gags would work with editing. And so, like, I tried to emulate that and, do like a flash cut edit, like someone's, getting their head pulled apart. And I was like, okay, well, I think I could do that and throw an edit in there in a clever way, so it switches to a fake head.
Yeah,
there were a couple of those in like what was that movie? Schwarzenegger, Mars, Total Recall.
Yeah.
I mean, this is going much quicker than usual because most of the people that we've interviewed, there's a lot of stuff to dig into. But for you, it actually seems very simple. That you started a
or
very
good or like. No, I mean it's similar to Sam's question too. I mean,
and
he
I'm
was
still the same now. I mean, like I don't think I've changed too much. Like I still pick apart movies, like more as like a learning thing. And I love watching bad movies as much as I love watching good movies, because I think you can learn a lot more from watching bad movies. Like learn others' mistakes and why they didn't succeed.
Right.
I've been doing a lot of that lately, actually, and what I find the most common one is boom mic placement.
Oh yeah,
just like there, it's like halfway across the frame. How did you? All right, never mind. Keep going. Yeah, bad movies are definitely a good source of entertainment and education.
Yeah. What is it? Dolomite.
Yeah.
The Rudy Ray Moore flick, man, you could make a drinking game out of how many like mics break film or break frame.
And get quite hammered by the end.
So now, I guess, what about as an adult? What are some of the things that, scary stories, books, movies that you've come across as an adult that have impacted you or you think are memorable?
Oh yeah, well, definitely more so now. Like there's certain films that I kind of consider horror, but they're not really horror. But I think they hit way harder than any kind of horror film could. And those are the films I like. They're just like bleak dramas. Those are the films, because like those are the ones I can like lose myself in and then be affected by them. Like Come and See. It's like a World War II film about like the Nazis and Russians. Seek that one out if you can. Really, really bleak.
No happy ending there.
I don't know. Like to me, like regular horror, like supernatural horror, unfortunately has become so paint by numbers where I've completely lost interest in it. Like I don't think I can sit down and watch another like Insidious film or Annabelle or anything from like the James Wan canon anymore, because they're all identical. And for me, that's just kind of it's boring. Like I've seen this before. Like I need something new. So yeah, there's a whole kind of genre or subgenre of like these bleak dramas which like to me are like they hit way more harder than any kind of horror film ever did.
So you mentioned Come and See. Any others?
Come and See, The Checkist. Both of those are like World War II films, that make like Saving Private Ryan and Schindler's List look like Disney films.
What was that one? The Checkist?
The Checkist, yeah.
Like CZ Checkist?
Chekist, Checkist.
Oh, check it. Okay.
Yeah, it's very hard to find though. What else? Like In a Glass Cage, like a Serbian film, I think kind of falls into that kind of category of a drama, where it's more of a drama. That's a really fucked up drama, because it makes you kind of like really off-putting and awful things happen. And I think a lot of people hear stuff about like something like a Serbian film and refuse to watch it, not really understanding that that's not what the film's about. Have you seen Serbian film, Steve?
I know Chris has, and he's mentioned it, and we've heard it's come up in a couple of our interviews already. Yes.
Yeah, it's a hard film.
Yeah, but he's got a point. If you do get around those qualities, then there is a rather bleak underlying story of a guy who tries to, get his life right, and then just gets sucked back into it because that's his life. I guess it's not happy ending.
But definitely recommend watching that one. It's a well-made film. Unfortunately, because some of the territory he gets into, I think, has really destroyed his career. Like in over 10 years, he hasn't been able to get funding to make another film. No one will fund him. The Serbian government totally fucked him over. After making that, they're fucking around with his visa. He's trying to come over to LA to work, but everyone's afraid to work with him because they think oh, he's this fucked up monster, and he's not. He's just a filmmaker who is trying to get noticed.
And you know what's funny? I just thought of about that is maybe if he had just gone with a different title, because that's what created that whole friction with I guess him and the Serbian government is it's called A Serbian Film, so it gives everybody that opinion or idea of Serbia, and I don't know, maybe if he had just gone with a different title, then he wouldn't have had that problem.
Well, he might not have had the problem with the government, but I mean, he probably still would have had quite a few problems that he's talking about.
I mean, yeah, there are certain aspects of the film that are still problematic.
It's more than just the title. It's funny, we're sitting here talking about films that don't have happy endings, and ones that aren't necessarily horror. Maybe a couple months ago, I sat Chris down to watch Cool Hand Luke, which is one of the classics, but it's not
I've never
horror.
seen it. It's one of those unacceptable moments. You've never watching this movie,
and definitely not a happy ending movie.
No, not really.
Never seen it. Okay, now I'm curious.
Put it on your list.
Okay.
1950s, would you say?
Like
60s?
a rapper?
No, it's
Oh, okay.
So it's Paul Newman, and he's on a chain gang because he's been arrested multiple times, and he plays this character Luke who just can't be tamed, and he keeps trying to escape jail, and things keep getting worse for him. And the end,
Okay.
he keeps trying, and it does not work out for him.
There's a lot of good parts of the movie, though.
There's a hot blonde.
There is that. It's an old film. It's a black and white. I want to say it was done in the 50s, maybe early 50s. Not 50s, early 60s. Early 60s. There's a couple people in there that you'll recognize because they either went on to do big things or were already doing some fairly big things. I mean, at the time, Paul Newman was already, I don't know if he was already a leading man, but he was an up-and-comer, if not.
He was well known.
Yeah.
I would say.
So,
and it's got that quote from that famous...
what we have here is a failure to communicate.
Aha, okay.
That's the movie that comes from. So I guess at this point, you mentioned to you these movies are somewhat even heavier to you than a horror film. So how can I say this? The human aspect, because other than maybe, well, even a Serbian film. I was going to say some of these, it's the human element, but
Hmm.
the thing with the Serbian film is there are people like that. So
Yeah.
um,
Films like Gaspar Noé's films, I think are, like Irreversible. Like, it's not a horror film, but it's a really fucked up film.
I still haven't watched that. I've been meaning to get around to that one. The whole thing's shot in reverse, right?
Yeah.
so what do you like about these, other than the fact that they're not gore?
They're probably like the only ones that like when I'm watching it, like I am affected by it.
Hmm.
Like, horror doesn't affect me like that anymore. Like, I could watch like the goriest thing, and outside of like, you know, picking apart the effects, like I forget to, listen to the story and kind of like, I guess, mentally involve, kind of fall involved with it.
Hmm.
Um, like the Saw films, like I think are fun effects, but they're not really deep films.
Right.
Not the most complex plot.
Yeah. No, that's perfectly reasonable. And particularly if you find yourself in a position where you can't help but pick apart the effects, then of course watching a film that doesn't really have effects is going to help you get away from that.
Yeah.
But yeah, having things that are emotionally affecting, that's part of
Hmm.
the reason that people watch movies is, to have a reaction to it that triggers
Yeah.
something. If you were just going to sit there and watch a teacher doing a lecture, like if you didn't want to have a reaction, then just go take a college course.
Right.
Those are expensive.
They can
Yeah, I
be.
guess but some people like really, sad movies or movies that make them cry. Like, I can't get into like romantic dramedies, or like any of that. Like, I have zero interest in it. But like, give me a movie like, Red, White, and Blue that's, kind of, I don't know. Oh, what did I see recently? Like, I think fucked me up pretty bad. Like, watching, I was like, this is a fucked up thing. It's kind of based on a true story. Girl Next Door, based on a Jack Ketchum novel. That's a fucked up. Like, nothing really fucked up happens in it, but so much fucked up stuff happens in it.
There's some pretty fucked up stuff that happens in it.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't really show anything. I mean, not that I think it needed to, like it crosses some lines, but not in the same way like Serbian film crossed lines.
Yeah. Yeah, that was apparently based on true facts. That's the fucked up part of that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not nice people out there, so you can do a lot of stuff that is historically accurate or even modern stuff that is real to life, and you don't have to go into a lot of blood and guts and gore to really creep a person out.
Yeah.
So have any of these current films introduced any fears that you didn't have before?
Yeah, no new fears. I think my, a fear of, how fucked up people can be, but that's kind of like everyday life, I think.
Yeah.
Watching the news kind of scares me sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does it cause you to change your behavior?
Ah,
That's a good one. In adult
that's a
years.
really good question. I don't know. I'd never tried to self-analyze like that, but I went. I mean, when you're out and about, you try and be cautious. Especially right now. Like, this is maybe a good example, and maybe we're all kind of doing this. Um, you know, During the stay-at-home quarantine, occasionally you need like, shit, I need dog food.
Hmm.
And so you got a brave going into the store, and you're looking around at everybody like, potentially everyone's sick, and you don't want them to get you sick, but everyone's kind of thinking the same thing. Like,
Hmm.
you're leery of people now. And yeah, I think that's kind of like a cause and effect, how everybody's kind of acting, but we're all kind of acting the same way because you don't know who's sick. It's like, how can you tell?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is one of those things where, like, if you were to hear this interview 10 years from now, you wouldn't really feel the context the way that we are feeling it recording it today because we're living through
Yeah.
it. But yeah, it's a very apropos thing for the moment. Have you continued participating in Halloween as an adult?
Oh yeah. For the last 17 years, I started working with a company, doing haunts for theme parks. So like I've traveled to like all the different theme parks. Like we started off doing Busch Gardens Tampa, and I worked with Howl-O-Scream for a good many years. And we'd also like go off and do other haunts for other parks like SeaWorld. God, what are some others? Hershey Park, Pennsylvania. Tons, and so that I do the haunt thing like all over the country, setting up stuff. I did scenic design on the inside, sets and props.
Did you originate in the Tampa Bay area and move somewhere else?
Oh yeah. Born and raised, in Clearwater, Safety Harbor area, but after I moved out, I moved to Tampa, so I was in Tampa up until I moved away again.
Chris and I have talked about a number of different people that he knew in the horror business, and I knew that he had mentioned somebody who started out here and then moved away, and I just couldn't remember off the top of my head if that was you or not.
Yeah,
that's me.
Moved out to LA, famous now.
Wait, are you in LA now? I thought you were in.
I'm in Illinois now, but I spent the last 3 years in LA, and not that I spent all the time in LA because I usually work on the road anyway. But we had moved out to LA, but it was it's way too expensive, and the way people act out there is exactly what you think.
Yeah. So you'd like to think there's some over exaggeration there, but no, it's exactly what you hear.
Yeah, and it's just it's not for me. I was like, I can do what I do anywhere, and so now. Yeah. This past year, got married. My wife and I got an awesome little house in the middle of nowhere, tiny town. So it's quiet out here, and I love it.
Nice. Congratulations, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
To both of you.
I used to work with the Genitortures. I did a bunch of their stage props years ago, in the 90s.
And the Impotent Sea Snakes.
Impotent Sea Snakes, Berta, all of them. Yes. ISS.
Yep. So as an adult now, I'm guessing you have a number of people that you share your horror interest with as an adult. Obviously, as a business partnership. What about as a social partnership? Do you have a community of friends or family that? You mentioned your family. You still watch. What was the movie you mentioned?
Oh, Night of the Comet.
Also, Hell Night, right?
Hell Night, that's what it was.
Hell Night, yeah.
And Night of the Comet too. Do you have a social group that you're part of?
Oh yeah, definitely. I work with Unearthed Films, and I was doing all the effects on the American Guinea Pig films. Steven and I were partners. We had moved out to LA together, and then I just had to leave LA. Yeah, and through that, we've got a group, and there's a whole huge sprawling fan base, and a lot of people are, in different horror groups. There's a lot of overlay or overlapping. So another really great group is Beneath the Underground, is a great group of people. But yeah, lots of friends, and because of extreme horror, very particularly, there's just a great kind of crew of people who are all really down to earth, and you'd think for a bunch of us who watch and work on the most kind of fucked up movies that are out there in the underground, you'd think everyone would be a bunch of weirdos and sickos, but everyone's pretty fucking normal.
I was waiting for you to say, and you're right. No, fairly normal, but maybe fucked up senses of humor.
Yeah. All of us kind of have gallows humor. Yeah. Or humor.
Which is perfectly fine, as long as you don't actually do those things. You just find them funny.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Chris and I are friends on Facebook, and I'll send him stuff all the time. And once in a blue moon, I'll find something that I'm just I have to share this privately. I'm not even going to post that publicly. It's just stuff that makes you go, "Oh, wow."
Yeah. Oh no, I totally have a warped sense of humor. I don't know. I think that keeps people sane. I don't know, and not to be offended by everything. Everyone's so offended by things. If something can shock me, I'm like, wow, that shocked me.
Yeah. Chris and I talked about whether or not we should put the trigger warning at the beginning of the program. And I thought it was a good thing to do because, there are a lot of people, but I also didn't want to censor the program because from at least my experience, I feel like one of the biggest problems, I don't know if I want to say of modern times, although it is definitely prevalent in modern times as well, but I think even historically, there are people who go through life who don't know how to process their own emotions, and then because they don't understand boundaries, they then want to cross a boundary and tell someone else that they need to change how they're living. But really the solution is just that, no, you need to learn how to handle your own emotions and process your own feelings about things. Don't go around changing the world just because you don't know how to handle the world not being the way you like it. Now, granted, there are definitely things that are wrong with the world that do need to be changed. So there's a time and a place to do that. But learning to differentiate between ones that you can handle yourselves and one that where you should change the world, not everybody has that insight, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Do you have any really scary dreams as an adult now, or is there anything that terrifies you as an adult?
No, that's another weird thing is like I don't get nightmares, and that's weird. I kind of feel left out. Like I hear people's dream stories, and I'm like, oh, that's some crazy shit. Like people can dream in like this very linear fashion, and like an entire story unfolds. But my dreams aren't like that. Like when I can remember them. But yeah, definitely, I don't get nightmares. Um, I think the closest thing to a nightmare I ever had was like when I was in high school. This girl had given in my dream, this girl had given me like a black and white Rubik's cube, and like the more I twisted it, the more it complicated it became, and then it started growing and became like the size of a room. And maybe that was like a stress dream more than a nightmare, but like I'd wake up and be like, holy shit. And I'd go back to sleep, and then I would be back in the dream again, and it would just restart until I finally like, fuck it, I can't go back to sleep, otherwise I'm gonna keep having this dream. That's probably the closest to a nightmare I've ever had. But in my dreams, if I do encounter like zombies or monsters, which is very rare that I ever have anything like that. It's always like I'm like, oh, okay, I gotta glue down this seam on the edge of his makeup. You gotta hide that. So maybe in my brain just kind of diffuses any kind of nightmare scenario.
Yeah, it's like the mother, coming up on a zombie and, oh, here, let me lick my finger and clean off your cheek. The zombie's just like, huh? So I would definitely say that, and you're maybe the first person that we have at each of these sections a question of, has horror made you feel happy in this phase of your life? And for you, it's been a positive thing in all three sections of your life, childhood, adulthood, and teenage years.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Now, looking back over your entire life, what movie would you say, and it doesn't have to be horror, but could be if you want to answer it that way, what movie have you watched more times than any other? And I'm not asking for the favorite movie, just which one have you watched more times than any
other? Probably a movie called The Forbidden Zone. It's made by Richard Elfman and Danny Elfman, who scores a lot of Tim Burton films, like and their band Oingo Boingo or the Mystic Knights of the. It's this batshit insane black and white musical. It's like probably like one of my most favorite things ever. Or Frankenhooker.
Well, you've already mentioned Frankenhooker. So what is it that you liked about The Forbidden Zone?
Oh, it's just all around wacky, insane. All the sets are built with cardboard. I mean, it's a musical, so it's catchy tunes, and of course it's songs written by Danny Elfman and the Mystic Knights of the Oingo Boingo. So it's like really catchy.
And it's got the little person from Fantasy Island.
Yeah.
Oh,
her baby is King Fausto. Um, and then probably like recently, like I didn't think any film could kind of like, those were, it was always I could never decide which was my number one favorite film, like Frankenhooker or Forbidden Zone. And then now I've, Greasy Strangler is probably up there on my like fucking absolute best films ever.
What do you like about that one?
It's retarded funny. I don't know. It's such a bizarre sense of humor, and like I fucking love it.
Okay. I think I can see the answer to this question, but I'll ask it anyway. Do you see any common threads about what kinds of horror that you like? For example, cannibalism, occult, metaphysical.
Yeah, I just like really ridiculous stuff. Like in the as far as like what my favorite things are, and it kind of transcends horror. It goes into like other things. Like I think if someone can get like a sense of humor like Tim and Eric Awesome Show, like that's probably the closest to like, okay, we'll probably get along if you can like watch a show like Tim and Eric or Too Many Cooks. Like we'll probably get along if you can understand like that kind of humor.
Yeah.
Why does that ring a bell?
Oh, Too Many Cooks. Oh,
It's too many cooks.
11 minutes of your life you'll never get back, but it's the most amazing thing.
What was it that they did?
Adult Swim put it on, and with no announcement, there was never like, oh, hey, stay tuned at this time for Too Many Cooks or something. It was just something that started with no warning and like didn't end for like 11 minutes, and everyone who saw it like was just, what the
Okay.
fuck am I watching?
It's like the most disturbing take on the Full House opening credits you can possibly think of.
Yeah, I googled it while we were talking about it, and now I've seen this. I remember this. Yes.
It's Too Many Cooks.
Yeah.
Too Many cooks.
Yeah.
Too many cooks.
I won't say anything for any listeners who want to go watch that. I don't want to give spoilers, but
please do. It'll change your life.
Yes, yeah. You'll enjoy it. I thought you were gonna. When I heard the name again, I knew that it seemed familiar, but now I can't think of the thing that I was thinking of, what it was called. And it may have also been an Adult Swim thing, but it was almost like puppets or. Chris, help me out here. I know I've shown it to you, but it's like very surreal.
Is it Xavier Renegade Angel?
No. It starts off like a children's show, but then goes really off the rails.
Is it Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared?
Yes, it is.
Yes, that.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Those guys are great. That's warped, weird stuff.
Yes. That stuff, I saw that, I was just like, whoa. Because I think when I first saw it, nobody introduced that to me. That just popped up in like my
you just like randomly stumbled upon Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. That is beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Internet.
Another good one that I think was like it's played on Adult Swim. It was called This House Has People in It.
Yes, I've seen that, yes.
And unedited footage of a bear. Like both of those.
Yeah.
It's made by the same people.
Yeah.
Okay.
I shared that with Chris, yeah.
I don't think I've seen This House Has People in It, but yeah, unedited footage of a bear.
Oh yeah, you'd appreciate This House Has People in It.
Yeah, I shared that one with you. It's maybe you didn't get a chance to watch it, but I definitely shared that with you. I saw it and I was like, oh, you got to check this out. Yeah, you said what I thought you were going to say. I figured that humor was the common thread. Now that we've kind of had this whole discussion, the one question that's left is, why horror? Because there could be any other number of things that trigger the kinds of emotions that you've been enjoying. Like, for example, if you like the special effects, well, you could have gotten into sci-fi. You know what I'm saying? So what is it about horror specifically that you like?
Is it the red stuff? It's the red stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, well, this is a tough question, huh? Yeah, because I guess, I mean, effects, I could go any direction with it. I could do fantasy or, like Game of Thrones or, I don't know, that sort of stuff. But I don't know, I just kind of gravitated towards like the blood and guts, which I feel like as an effects artist, this is really weird, but I really feel Blood and Guts is on like the low end of the totem pole. Like it's
Compared to
kind of
what?
lowbrow in the effects world. Like, there's some amazing, makeup artists out there and sculptors and stuff, but like, that's like the upper echelon, the top tier, and they kind of all look down at like, oh, you're a Blood and Guts guy. But I don't know. I have fun doing it. Like, I'm really well with life casting. It's just, years of practice and, just making body parts. And I kind of got good at that. So that's all people kind of hire me for. It's rare I get to do creatures or monsters or anything, but I don't know. The blood and body parts are fun.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, the thing that really jumped out at me for that to answer that question is because, I mean, that's where you came from. Your parents enjoyed horror, so there's probably some sort of emotional connection there. If your parents liked sci-fi, then maybe you would have gone into sci-fi.
Yeah.
So there was one thing that we kind of touched on that we haven't really talked about a lot. I kind of got the sense that there was some amount of pride that you got out of basically building stuff. There's the creative aspect of having a finished product, not only in terms of a feature length movie, but even the small things inside it that not create contribute to what's that?
None.
No. Contribute to the the final product, and having some pride in saying I built this. So I think for me the things that, if I were to sum up this interview, it sounded like to me the things that the summary is: A, you like the building stuff, the creation aspect of it, and B, that you have some positive experiences that tie you back to your family and friends, that there's the social element. Does that sound about accurate to you, or is there something you think
pretty
I'm missing?
accurate? Yeah, I mean, just as any kind of artist or creative person, like to be able to create things. I don't know. It's totally different. I mean, don't get me wrong; it can become like work, but I think in most of the time, 9 times out of 10, it's like just fun and exhilarating to get to create, to do stuff. Like it doesn't feel like a job when you're making a movie.
Well, and another thing you said earlier in the call that I didn't put to words, but solving a puzzle.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because a lot of it, especially when it's something that creates like a challenge. Like I really more into like an effect that like I've never done before. Like American Guinea Pig films, like really put me in challenging kind of mentally sort of way, because it's just not the same old thing like, oh, here's a severed head or here's a severed arm. Like after a while that kind of feels paint by numbers and kind of loses its appeal. But like when I get like some effects work where it's like, okay, I really got to wrap my head around how I'm going to achieve this and how we're going to shoot it, so I like to be presented, and it is kind of like a puzzle, to figure out how you're going to pull something off.
This is actually kind of a perfect segue into, you mentioned, whatever you wanted to pitch would be at the end of the call. But, if this is the case that, you're interested in solving puzzles and you feel like you have already solved some of the puzzles in the blood and gore aspect, well, then what puzzles are you working on now? What kind of things?
Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, recently my wife and I did a documentary, kind of breaking down red films, or the most extreme films in the underground, the most fucked up stuff out there, because number one, to our knowledge, no one has ever really covered these types of films, like stuff like August Underground, the Vomit Gore trilogy, Scrapbook. I mean, there's a list goes on, like filmmakers like Marion Dora, Lucifer Valentine, um, Fred Vogel, like there's all kinds of documentaries out there on like Freddy and Jason and horror and horror and horror and horror ad nauseum, but no one's really covered the dark side of underground cinema. So like, yeah, that was just something we wanted to kind of take a look into like what makes, these filmmakers tick, what makes the fans like gravitate towards these types of films.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously at first glance you'd think like, oh, someone has to be really like sick and fucked up to make something like that, or has to be sick and fucked up to enjoy something like that. And so and it's surprisingly like everyone's like pretty normal,
super
and
nice,
healthy,
civil people,
well put together, who make this and watch this.
It sounds like that is a very it has a lot in common with this podcast. The conversation that Chris and I had was, I'll start it off with just the name of the website. I was driving to Fort Lauderdale and thinking to myself about how could I come up with a way that would help Chris with what he's working on as far as his feature film goes. And one of the conversations that he and I had was on coming up with a website name, and how what some of the people in the film industry are starting to do is come up with website addresses or website names that are kind of tangentially related to the film, but not. I'm trying to think of a good example. Like if the house in your horror film is, the address is 123 Maple Street, then maybe your website would be 123 Maple Street. Like it's related, but it's not something that you would necessarily think that somebody would come and pick that name before you got to it. And as I'm sitting there thinking, the words "Horror Makes Us Happy" popped into my head, and then I thought, wow, that'd be a great website name. And so I started talking to Chris, and we thought, well, what could we do with this? Because it's not necessarily relevant for the Pieces compendium that he's working on. It's not really a happy story.
It can make you happy. There's violence in it.
Well, depends on who it's happy for.
Sadists.
Yes. But the idea was, well, what else could we do with that? And then the idea of a podcast of, digging into what it is about people, what is it that people enjoy about horror? Because as you say, there's not a lot of material out there. I mean, if you go to school to be a psychotherapist, maybe you learn some stuff that's relevant, but in terms of what material is out there available to the normal person, there really isn't a lot.
I mean, no, as you said, there are still, various documentaries on things like mainstream horror, but no, I guess no one's really touched on the psychological aspect of it, of like, why do people enjoy these things, aside from, the occasional, 6-minute blurb interview of somebody who happens to be a psychologist in a documentary that's just of several other horror films and things like that.
Right. Mm-hmm. So that was sort of the idea of why we want to do what it is that we're doing. So that kind of ties in with what you're doing there with Beyond Horror, which is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you for joining us. Was there anything else that you wanted to discuss or pitch other than Beyond Horror?
No, I mean, that's, I guess our newest endeavor, Jesse Seitz and myself, Beyond Horror, the history subculture of red films. Probably it'll be out for release June or sometime after June. Like right now, we've currently been playing film festivals, but because of the coronavirus thing, the next few months of screenings that we had all set up all kind of fell apart and went to the wayside, while everyone's life across the board has kind of had to been put on hold. So
no film festivals at the current moment now.
Yeah.
So that's been kind of a bummer for us, but I mean, right now our plan is to still have aim for a June release of our DVD, and then to our Indiegogo supporters, and then after that do the full kind of wide release to everyone else. And I'll link you the trailer too.
Sure. And we've also got a group page on Facebook. We can send you an invite on that, and we'll, when the time comes, we'll reach out and say, hey, we're ready to release this particular episode, and we can go through all that stuff.
Oh, right. So, cool.
Yeah. So again, thank you for joining us. For the listeners, thank anybody out there listening. Please come visit us at horrormakesUshappy.com. We'll have a schedule posted there to show who we're interviewing next, as well as a list of who we'd like to interview. If you can help us connect with any of those people, or if you'd like to see someone added to the list that we don't have, let us know. You can also become a Patreon supporter. There are links to our social media on the website. In general, just let us know how we're doing. OrMakesUsHappy.com.